The poster child for alternative business school education in India is dead. I'm talking about the Bangalore-based Stoa School, which literally introduced India to the concept of the alternative MBA. Stoa has said that it is no longer accepting new students.
So, we are going to dive into the story of Stoa today. And for that, we need to start right at the beginning 2020. This was the year Stoa introduced its revolutionary 6-month part time MBA program with a focus on the startup ecosystem. And with that, it started a whole new trend. Very soon, other companies like Upraised, Mesa, Masters Union all started following that trend.
But what even is an alternative MBA? And how is it different from your regular run-of-the-mill MBA?
So the script is pretty simple. They tell you that you don't need to give up your employment to be educated. This will be not as expensive as the other programs out there. It'll be shorter too, like it'll be 6 months. And at the end of it, you'll have enough skills and a strong enough network to enter the startup space. So
Right.
these alt MBA programs are exclusively for breaking into the startup scene. So that was the pitch that they made to students, that we'll just equip you with skills and a strong enough network to like tread these testy waters.
And just to clarify, you're not getting a degree at the end of all of that, right?
No, you get, so they call it certificate of competence, but
Okay.
it's just unaccredited. So it's just
So not even a diploma or anything like that.
nothing.
That is our colleague, the Ken reporter Nathan Nade. And he was actually the one who broke the story about Stoa shutting down earlier this month. And what he just said was quite interesting. So, at the end of an alt MBA, you're not getting a degree or even a diploma of any sort. It's all about the experience.
And funnily enough, people were lapping it right up. These courses were hugely popular, and that's because, at the end of the day, a lot of people want an MBA. But not everyone can get into a top business school.
So 2023 witnessed like a record registration in the CAT exam at 3.3 lakh students, and this was 30% more than the previous year. So when I spoke to Professor Venkatesh from IIM Bangalore, he made it very clear that alt MBAs or new age MBA institutions, they're basically filling a capacity gap in the education ecosystem. 3.3 lakh students compete for roughly 5,500 seats. So basically, and this is something that's echoed even by the founders of like alt MBA schools, that the general view is that we need more institutions in the country.
Right.
So demand will always outmatch supply. And that's why you have the likes of like Stoa School popping up, Mesa School of Business, which is an offline MBA program, and Masters Union and the likes.
So, the alt MBA is filling a gap in the Indian business education system in more ways than one. The reason platforms like Stoa were considered so revolutionary is because they set out to literally change the approach to business education. They felt the most important lessons were learned outside the classroom.
They didn't see the utility of traditional MBAs and breaking into like the startup scenes. Like they felt that the syllabus was outdated. We didn't have like any industry visits. Like they'll just learn about theories and case studies, which is like the mainstay approach of like traditional B schools.
Right.
Now they come with the built-in benefit of hindsight compared to like an alt MBA, which is like a more practical way of learning. They call it learning by doing. That's the mantra all of them follow. So they'll probably go to like a Kirana store, they'll go to like a Reliance retail, they'll speak to people, engage with them, see what it's like. So it's a more on ground and hands on approach.
So basically, Stoa was offering you an MBA that was significantly cheaper, was giving you more real world hands on experience, was helping you build a network, and you had the flexibility to do it while holding on to your job. It was ticking all the boxes, and it almost felt too good to be true. And it was. 4 years later, now Stoa is shutting shop. So, what really went wrong?
Stoa's story is similar in many ways to most businesses that saw an online boom because of the pandemic. But the pandemic eventually did come to an end.
So 2023, and this is what the founders have said as well, like was this turning point. Like live learning was facing headwinds and Stoa was standing right in the midst of all of this.
Welcome to the Friday special episode of Daybreak. I'm Snigdha.
And I'm Rahil, and once a week, Snigdha and I come together to talk about things in business and tech that interest the both of us.
And it won't just be us. Depending on what we're talking about, we'll also be bringing in a bunch of really interesting people onto the podcast.
In this episode, we talk to our colleague here at the Ken, Nathan Narde. He tells us about the Stoa School story and what went wrong along the way. What's interesting is that a lot of these altMBA programs were launched around the same time, right? The COVID pandemic.
Right.
What was it about that time that was so like...
I think their offering also was tailor made to like the pandemic. So they all decided to be online only, especially with Stoa School and even like the likes of Kairos, which is almost identical in terms of its offering. So it was just a natural fit at the time. Like we will remain online only and then we'll offer this education to like people that have more time at hand.
Right.
Like there was no mandate of working from office back then, which gives them this ability to like engage with the course, because being a Stoa student is time demanding. Like, oh my god, like every day there are readings and there were check-ins on the readings. Over the weekends you have live lectures which go on for like say 8 hours over the course of 2 days, and then you discuss them obviously. So it's very demanding, and in this 6-month process they have 18 weeks of learning.
Wow.
They're called sprints, and they cover like different topics from like marketing to product management and like a wide host of subjects. So it was very demanding to be a Stoa student.
Right.
And people found this experience enriching in the beginning as well.
How popular were these programs?
So Stoa kicked off with around 60 students in its first cohort. The numbers swelled to like 130 in like cohort 5, after which it just became like 100 odd. And 4 years, they had around 15 cohorts. So roughly 1,500 students have gone through this program.
Wow.
Right.
So, Nathan, apparently these companies, they're now looking for specializations, right? Like data science, digital marketing, statistics. Do these altMBA courses offer any of these specializations?
I don't think, no, they do not offer specialization in any of these fields, because it's like only 6 months of learning, right?
Yeah.
They don't offer depth per se. It's a more generalist view. So like even like take financial accounting, they won't be taught mergers and acquisitions, because someone at this age won't be even an M&A team at a company.
Correct.
So they drop these parts from their syllabus. And this was covered in like the Ken's previous story on Stoa in 2021, where we interviewed the founders. So like this is exactly what they had said back then. Like we'll drop a module or two because students don't really engage in these topics at the beginning of their career.
So, can you tell us a little bit about these courses? What subjects, a little bit?
Like it ranges from like, again, like product marketing, branding, product management. These are like the 4 major verticals under which they're taught over these 18 weeks. But again, they don't offer too much depth. Now, another unique factor about Stoa was that they had this thing called a charter. Now, a charter is like a PhD dissertation of sorts. Like they'll pick a real life problem, like, and this is exactly what happened at Stoa. Like, identify a new revenue stream for Cars 24. This is something that they actually had.
Okay.
So the students can voluntarily opt into this charter program. They'll come up with like a solution using first principles thinking, and then they have to present it in front of a jury. So that was one level of like certification that they offered. So like once you cross that, you'll be a charter holder as well. But this was optional, and this only kicked in like I think in the sixth cohort or fifth cohort onwards.
Got it.
So all of this sounds really great on paper, but I'm interested to know if, getting an alt MBA from, say, Stoa or from anywhere else, is it, you've spoken to so many people who've done it, is it taken seriously by like employers, or is it just like fluff on your CV?
Right. I think it is taken seriously by employers because a lot of people do swear by like getting placements from Stoa because the founders themselves were very well integrated into the startup ecosystem. Like take Raj Kulkarni, his brother is running another startup called Wint Wealth.
Right.
So they always spoke about this guy called Ankit, who's there in like their marketing promos as well, who was a Stoa student and then ended up at Wint Wealth. So within the startup ecosystem, they're held in like very high regard. So they see like if you're Stoa, there's like some stamp of approval that you know a thing or two about how this world works. So we'll take a bet on you. So a lot of people do swear by like Stoa's placement process as well.
Right.
But over the course of time, now that led to like a mismatch of expectations too, because they didn't exactly say that we'll give you a placement, but students wanted it. So it was a mental model that the students walked in with. But Stoa always maintained that, hey, we're just going to give you skills and these education in like certain subjects, and we won't like guarantee placements. But there was like a mismatch of expectations towards the end.
Right.
And when I spoke to the founders about this, they conceded to the fact that you will find anecdotal cases such as these, but they're a minor draw. Majority of the people felt self-sufficient to go for jobs themselves and go and look for jobs themselves.
Got it. You obviously spoke to a lot of Stoa students, right?
Right.
Like, what did they tell you about, not about the placement, but about the course in itself?
They found it very enriching. Like, but another key thing is that they found the course material enriching. It was demanding. Like, it took up a lot of their time, and the major problem was that it was online only.
Yeah.
Yeah, like so a program operator at Stoa like characterized it perfectly. She's like, joining Stoa is like getting a gym membership. What you get out of it is determined by what you put in.
Yeah.
So as long as you're self-motivated, you will get outsized outcomes from this course. So those that were really self-motivated did get those outsized outcomes. But for some of the students I spoke to, engagement waned. And that was a given because like you can literally walk up out of a lecture, right?
Yeah.
And this is what even the ex-employees confessed to, that they kind of struggled with maintaining those engagement levels.
Got it.
So I'll just give you an instance. There would be daily readings given to like a student, and there would be check-ins on for those readings. It used to be like a 1 hour check-in. That 1 hour check-in became every alternate day.
Yeah.
From 1 hour, it became half an hour. And all of this happened as we moved out of the pandemic.
Right. Yeah.
So 2023, and this is what the founders have said as well, like was this turning point. Like live learning was facing headwinds and Stoa was standing right in the midst of all of this.
And is that where things kind of started going downhill?
Yes,
For Stoa?
the unraveling of Stoa lies in its transition out of the pandemic. And even the founders confessed this in the story as well. Like live learning was facing like a challenge everywhere.
Right.
And another thing is education fundamentally faces a customer acquisition problem.
Right.
This is what another founder called Vaibhav from Growth School had pointed out, that everyone struggles with this, and to solve for it, you depend on marketing. Now, it's either organic or paid or performance
Correct.
marketing. Now, Stoa before the pandemic had a 50-50 split. Post-pandemic, this ratio started skewing.
Right.
And it was kind of bleeding the business dry. To give you an idea, they were probably spending in the course range of like 1.2 to 1.5 lakh per student for performance marketing, and the ticket size was 3 lakh.
Oh, got it.
So it was becoming unsustainable for them.
This is quite like what happened to edtechs, right?
Right. It's par
after
for the
pandemic.
course.
Yeah, correct. Like the whole post-pandemic,
Right.
online learning wasn't a big
Right.
thing anymore. Right. Were there any other things that were common between, what happened to these big ed techs and what's happening to alt MBAs?
Actually not common, but something unique about Stoa.
Okay.
And this is something all of the ex-employees pointed out to me is that whenever any edtech found themselves in such a sticky situation, there's just one thing you resort to: hard selling.
Right. Yeah.
So that's something that Stoa refrained from doing. And this was true across all of the 7 ex-employees I spoke to. They were like, although Stoa may have failed as an experiment, we have like profound respect for the founders for like sticking to their guns. They were like, we're not going to resort to these techniques because the edtech space is like marred by this
Yeah.
reputation of hard. Yeah, it is ugly
Yeah.
because they end up taking advantage of like rather innocent students.
Very true. Yeah.
So yeah, not common, but it was like unique. Like they didn't resort to these tactics.
Okay, so consider this scenario. You just started your first job at a new company. You're doing quite well, so you get tasked with leading a project. How exciting! But now you have so many dependencies on people from different teams to make this happen. And absolutely no authority or title whatsoever to demand it of anybody. You're starting to notice that many of your senior colleagues are judgmental of your skills and expertise to run the project. You're facing resistance to get people on board. This continues to happen week after week after week. And you start to wonder if you're not being taken seriously enough. Well, this isn't a hypothetical scenario. A listener had written in with this exact problem. In the latest episode of The First 2 Years, an early careers podcast from the Ken, I explore influencing without authority with the brilliant Dr. Nashita Due-Solheim. She's a psychologist and author, and she's worked with psychopaths in maximum security prisons. So it's safe to say that she knows a thing or two about building rapport and trust with difficult people, I guess. Basically, she's a pro at making connections, and we explore so much in our short time together, including what's this coveted thing called influence, why you need it for people to listen to you, and what makes someone follow your lead. It's free and streaming everywhere. The link is in the show notes. I am Akshaya Chandrasekharan, host of The First 2 Years. Thank you, and now I'll let you get back to the conversation between my wonderful colleagues, Snigdha, Rahil, and Nathan.
Talking about, what employees thought of, Stoa founders, can you tell us a little more about what students thought of them?
Students, again, like warm words for like all of the founders across, like be it Raj or like Aditya, they really liked them as individuals. They liked their perceptiveness about the entire space. Like Aditya Kulkarni, he's quite something. Like he has these one-liners that really catch on. Just to give you a flavor of what he says, he's like, I think of my students and myself as a professional, not a thing to be placed. And that translated to like his life and how he approached Stoa too. So Aditya himself went to IIM Bangalore, which is like a very prestigious MBA program, and he chose not to sit for placements. He chose to like work in the planning commission. So, and then he ended up working in the education space. His last project was called Lido. It's a shorthand for learning by doing. Again, it comes back to the mantra
Stoa,
of like altMBAs.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what the students like feel about them. And yeah, I think there was that mismatch of expectations only later on, but it wasn't that big of a problem. Like people still like muscled their way through it.
So it's like a really unusual guy who made like unusual choices and ran like a pretty unusual business, right? Like we were talking about the pandemic a little while ago and how this was a business built during the pandemic, and it saw some of its best times during the pandemic, and post-pandemic is when things went downhill.
Right.
The obvious reason for that would be that online to offline transition.
Right.
If you could talk to us a little bit about how Stoa navigated that.
Right. So that's again another interesting point. So they entertained the option of like going offline. So much so that there was this space that they found in Bannerghatta. It's a WeWork, a third floor. Right now, it's occupied by people studying an alt-MBA just from the Mesa School of Business.
Right.
So, like, the irony is palpable, like people are still studying there, but just not Stoa students. But when I spoke to the founders, they were just very clear that there was no founder fit for this model. They wanted to work in a remote-only manner. So that was the major reason they decided not to go offline.
Right.
And it's a totally different beast as well that they didn't want to entertain.
Right. But you know what's interesting there is that with Stoa, there's so much emphasis on building your network, on building like meaningful connections and things like that.
Right.
But to be able to do that like virtually on Zoom or on Discord or whatever, just the idea of it sounds, it's almost contradictory in that
Right,
sense, right?
right.
Like they seem to be almost like vehemently opposed to the idea of being offline, right?
Right.
They didn't want to be like any other business school.
Exactly. That it's the alt. They have to
Yeah.
put the alt in the alt MBA. So they kind of recognize this as well that we need to have some offline element.
Yeah.
And this comes from their insider motto that we have to be this third place. Now, what they mean by that is that apart from work and family, everyone needs a third place to belong.
Right.
Like they gave me the example of like the bar in How I Met Your Mother or like the coffee shop in like Friends,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They wanted to be that third place for students that wanted to break into the startup scene. So they were cognizant of this and they started a immersion program, which was like completely offline. And I think it started around cohort 6 onwards.
Right.
Basically, from like Friday morning to like Sunday evening, there would be like marathon meetings and they'll just get a brief flavor of what the course is going to look like.
Okay.
So they started off with like going offline then, but that was the extent of it. Students kind of took it on themselves to like interact with each other, and there was this tradition of like going to Goa at the end of Stoa ending. So this was like another
Goa after Stoa.
yeah. Goa after Stoa was something that all of them followed,
Okay.
like as a ritual. And again, this wasn't a diktat from the founders.
It just happened
it just
organically.
happened organically. But like then again, there's nothing alternative about going to Goa after your course is over. Everyone does it.
True.
10th grade, 12th grade, college. Yeah, everyone does it.
Yeah. Nathan, can you give us like a clear picture of when things started going downhill after the pandemic? Like, how did it play out?
Right. So they entertained this option to go offline in 2023, say early 2023 March. And then I think in August, the writing on the wall got clear that we need to press pause and no longer accept any students. However, they did not make this clear to A, their employees, B, the students. And they continued to maintain that silence until the story broke as well. When
Wow.
they were.
You broke the story.
Yes.
Just to make it clear to our listeners.
Right.
Yeah.
So even once the story came out, they maintained that Stoa is just hitting pause and they will update everyone about their future plans in early August. But as of now, they're no longer accepting students. So Stoa School, for all intents and purposes, no longer exists.
Right.
So yes, like that's where we're at right now.
So, tell us a little more about employees, because you also mentioned in your story that they cut short the number of employees, right?
Right.
Like from 35 to 10, I think.
Yes, so like they laid off 70% of their workforce.
So, what sense did you get from these ex-employees?
Whenever I spoke to the ex-employees, they were like, okay, the program's over. Like this, we're just like waiting for this final cohort to end, and we'll keep waiting to see what they do next. And I think almost all of the employees were like, although Stoa, the sun may have set on Stoa, the alt-MBA story will live on. And they were so keen of like joining the founders in their next adventure. So they were really taken in by the mission that Stoa set out with.
That's some loyalty.
Yeah, it was genuinely very interesting to see the kind of compassion they had for like the founders. And I met like 3 of them in person, and it was genuinely like very authentic.
That's
So
amazing.
they weren't faking it. Like you can
God.
tell.
Yeah.
You can tell sometimes, but yeah, they weren't faking it. So that was my key takeaway when I spoke to the ex-employees.
Can you also tell us what are the other competitors doing? Are they facing the same issues? What's happening?
Right. So in this story, I spoke to Vaibhav, who also founded Growth School, which is a skilling platform, and they offer courses from that range from like 2-day courses or 2-month courses.
For example?
Like they'll teach you coding or like
Oh,
how to
okay.
use Notion, like very micro skills,
Yeah.
like
Got it.
micro skills, right? And there was a demand within Growth School students to have like a more structured business school course. Now, Q to 2024, we have the birth of this company called Cairo School of Business.
Right.
Now, Cairo School of Business again comes under Vaibhav's belt, and the it's identical to Stoa. Like the offering is almost identical. It's a 6-month online only program. They have this outclass component where they meet for an immersion program. They want to be that third place as well. The only difference is that Vaibhav pointed out is that they pay zero on marketing. So there's a pipeline of students from Growth School that came to Kairos. So they didn't end up paying anything for marketing. Like 100% of their first cohort was just Growth School students. And in their second cohort, which is going to begin in like a month or so, 70% according to him are from Growth School, and 30% are word of mouth referrals from the first cohort of Kairos.
Wow. So Growth School is almost working like a mini advertising sort of a
Right,
you
like
know?
a pipeline. It's a funnel for them. Yeah.
That's very
And they don't
interesting.
pay anything on customer acquisition. This is what the founders said on record.
Just one more related question to this. Like what are these competitors thinking about the whole online versus offline approach?
So when I spoke to Vaibhav about going offline, he's like, never say never. Like I may entertain that choice.
Stoa
but-
said never.
Yeah, Stoa said never. It was like they said there was no founder fit for that model. But Vaibhav was like, never say never. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That's their approach for now, at least.
Understood.
And is there like a sense of, okay, if it happened to Stoa, it could happen to us? Did you?
Not really. Like, I spoke to another altMBA kind of company called Upraised, where they basically focus on upskilling product managers for tomorrow.
Right.
Her name is Mona Gandhi. She founded the company. Again, a pandemic baby. She said that altMBAs are more relevant now than ever, given the onset of generative AI. People need to be upskilled,
Yeah.
and they may not have the opportunity of like opting out of like the workforce for a full-time degree. So these courses become more relevant than ever. So not really. They don't have that sense that okay, this happened to Stoa, so we might get caught in that crossfire. I think Stoa had like unique problems just specific to them. But again, Kairos is only 2 cohorts old. Let's see what happens down the line.
I'm feeling a little confused about this whole thing. Like one of the reasons that Stoa was affected after the pandemic was also because people were expected to go back to office, and like you said, like these courses were very intensive, right? So it was very difficult to manage.
Right.
So how are these competitors then expecting the same thing to go smoothly?
Online engagement is like always going to be a challenge in these circumstances. So they try to have like these, they call outclass components. Basically, they're trying to be offline. Upraised follows a similar thing where they try to meet at least once a month or so. But I think the same thing holds true for Kairos, where they try to meet for the first 3-4 days. But going forward, I think they will have to have some offline component to it just to keep their students engaged.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of the Ken, India's first subscriber-focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber-only offerings.
A full subscription unlocks daily long-form feature stories, newsletters, and podcast extras. Head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the Ken website.
Today's episode was hosted and produced by Rahel Philippos and I, Snigdha Sharma, and it was edited by Rajiv Sien.